believe we're live. Hello and welcome to this APIsecure conference roundtable discussion on the next chapter after ModSec, a smarter security rules engine. I'm Gardner, Director of Content at Traceable AI, and I'll be your moderator for this live discussion on how open source project Corazza forms an exciting new expansion and extension of the traditional web application firewall approach. Before we introduce our guests, please note that we welcome your comments and questions. Simply add them in here on your virtual conference interface, and we will address them as we can. And we'll also have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of our discussion. With that, please join me now in welcoming our panel. We're here with Juan Pablo Tosso. He's the Security Research Engineer at Traceable AI. Welcome, Juan Pablo.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We're also here with Sanjay Nagaraj. He's co-founder and chief technology officer at Traceable AI. Hello, Sanjay.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me, Diana.
You bet. We're also joined by Felipe Zipitria. He's a senior security engineer at Life 360. Welcome, Felipe.
Hi, Diana. Yeah, pleasure to meet you.
So the OWASP core rule set project recently added an open source rules engine called Corazza, developed and managed to a significant part by Juan Pablo and his community of followers and contributors. Corazza is a high performance potential replacement for mod security, but it's much, much more. So Juan Pablo, tell us why Corazza was of interest, how it got started, and what were the primary drivers for undertaking this effort?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to have my own startup 6 years ago, and we tried to build a web application firewall, an enterprise one. And because of the costs, we believed that the approach that we needed was an open source technology that we could leverage on. So we took mod security and we tried to leverage on it by using the core rule set. But we had many issues with the cost and the architecture of what was mod security in C++ on these days. So basically, we turned our approach into an open source focus in Golang that is easier to understand. It has a shorter learning curve. And the idea was to have something easier to implement and with a open source friendly license.
And so mod security is not necessarily designed for your average Joe, never mind your security engineer. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not a WAF itself. It's basically an engine that requires rules to make something smart out of a transaction of our request. But mod security was not enough. We needed something that we could easily extend, and we could also invite the community into it, because it's exclusive to actually develop for mod security or these technologies, because it's hard to learn how to implement things inside of it.
And why is it an advantage to get more people, democratization, if you will, of rules and security capabilities?
Because the WAF is built for the enterprise. A rule engine must fit the needs of current webs, and we need models, we need intelligence, we need a lot of data before deploying something. So we need many users and company. We require engagement, and the costs for developing a rule engine or a WAF itself today, it's just too high. So having something to leverage on that will be a friendly tool for open source developer. It's pretty nice right now.
And so what has been the history of Corazza, and who else has been involved in making it to what it is today?
Okay, so Corazza was a startup attempt back in 2016. With some funding, and I had the chance to use resources from many companies that helped us, like Amazon or Microsoft. It was really cool. It was an old project. In time, we ran out of funding, so the project slowed down. after the pandemic, it was easier to retake the project because there was much more free time. Back there, the project was a proprietary license, but I felt like I should take an open source approach and engage the community into it and use what I learned of the old versions of Karasa to build something community friendly. So I started the development in Golang, and in time, well, Mod Security announced its end of life, and many things happened that will make the project even more important. So Felipe contacted me with the CRS team. He's actually the co-leader for the CRS team, and we started talking about what will be the Coraz in the future, about CRS compatibility. So the milestone for developing Corasa became being compatible with CRS. In time, we released Corasa V2. Now we are 100% compatible with them. We really participate between each other. They also invited me to Switzerland to their retirement, where we spoke about the synergy between Corasa and core rule sets. It was a really nice moment. Switzerland is really cool. It's pretty, and it was an important milestone. Eventually, we caught the attention from OWASP, and now we are also an OWASP project from this year. We are OWASP Corasa V2.
Felipe, what prompted your interest and excitement in Corazza?
Whoa, that's a very good question, Dana. Thanks. Basically, if I started, I normally do, because of my many hats, I normally work around WAF since a long time ago. And my contributions to CRS prompt me, like, I don't know, sometime I just go look at GitHub, my repo of choice, and try to find things around more security, the language, the core rule sets, and whatnot. And I found Karasa at some point, and I think there was a previous project from a developer from Taiwan that was trying to do a small parser, which was not what we were looking about. And when I found this, that was really like a more mature project. Then immediately I started talking with the rest of the core set devs. And our leader, Christian, just contacted Juan Pablo for a call. So I think that the next week we had a call, and that was really, really good. We have a really good call with Juan Pablo about objectives, about where to go in the future, timelines, and whatnot. And after that first meeting, we started connecting a lot with Juan Pablo and going over features, taking a look. And that synergy that Juan Pablo mentioned about this product, Corazza, and the core rule set started right away. We went back and forth, enriching each other. He was finding bugs. We were finding bugs. We were helping each other. And that's the open source spirit that was really out there. And really, Juan Pablo delivered a lot. It was impressive that the amount of things that he did at the moment. And that real collaboration started as a good synergy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about its potential technically that got you excited and interested?
Well, I did previous projects. I also worked for the local university, so worked for students in the past for doing like similar projects to WAFs, like in other languages. We tried with Rust, and we have a prototype using Rust and doing funny things with Rust. But Golang was an interesting language because of the simplicity compared to Rust in the moment. And that was one of the things that was really back and forth with my students at the moment. And I knew that Go was a more suited language because of many of the things that we were trying. And that was really a hit, because finding this a good language, a good product, good security features, it was really outstanding at the moment. So that's why it led me to get this content going on and really the product was designed to work similar in a way with most security, but right now I will say that it's outgrowing the functionality quickly, so
Right.
that's a good thing.
Sanjay, both Felipe and Juan Pablo mentioned simplicity as being important here. That tells me that something's wrong with the state of security in current format. So, what is it that got you interested in Coraza, and why is simplicity so important when it comes to making a better infrastructure for rules and for this sort of post-WAF solution?
Yeah. Thanks, Dana. So I think Traceable, obviously, we are focused on APIs and API security that way, right? Discovering the APIs and protecting them from attacks. One thing that's become very clear is that in the next generation of microservices and cloud native architectures, it's very, very important that the agility of how code moves to get new services, new APIs online. It's also important that the security aspects of it is a lot more open source and can actually help developers adopt some of the techniques so that they can protect their applications much better, right? ModSec obviously is very widely deployed and was being used, but obviously as we started discussing some of these things with our customers who are using WAFs and everything else from ModSec rules perspective, it was very clear that you needed a next generation of it, which is a lot more rules engine based, which can actually understand rules in a different way, and the way you can actually go and formulate those rules and kind of codify those rules, if I may, right? And that's where Coraza came in, and Juan Pablo and I started to have conversations about how can Coraza replace ModSec, but also be a lot more focused on the next generation of services, right? And the simplicity aspects of it, everything that you look today in the modern agile development of microservices that way, the goal is to how do you make it more and more simpler to deploy new pieces of code multiple times an hour, if not minutes. And that means that anything that we build from a commercial perspective or open source perspective, it has to be simple enough such that the DevSecOps as a community can adopt it, right? And that's what we saw with Coraza as well, like where we can kind of go and say there are obvious security vectors which are very clear, which can be codified and it can be rules based, that if those low-hanging fruit can actually be used by developers to incorporate as part of their own cycles, I think that's where for us the rules engine made a lot of sense. The other thing was, how do we make this very performant that way? Because if any application, if it is not performant, or any libraries that get used as part of it, if it's not performant, then from a DevSecOps perspective, it's a dead on arrival, right? That's where the focus from a Coraza perspective in making it a rules engine, making it performant, making it easy to use from a codification perspective is what interested me and Traceable.
Mm-hmm. So Juan, the rules engine is one part, but the rules are another. How will Coraza not only provide a more open and agile rules engine, but how might it open up a new category of rules engine languages and uses?
Well, so this is a discussion that actually belongs to course ruleset / Coraza, because it's interesting for us all. So basically, we are limited to what our current rule language supports. But with a bit of tweaks, we can still use complex operators around what we have. The idea in the near future will be to have a smarter language that's not a programming language itself. I mean, simple directives that will indicate how to protect an application. And I think the new language should also have a strong focus on what's API security, because today in order to create an API rule, you will have to set the path, the method, and a lot of variables that are really tough to in a syntax in terms of syntax, it's hard to read them. So basically, a new language should have a focus on making it simple, to create simple rules for WAF, to create rules from directly for an endpoint.
Felipe, why is this of interest to you? Do you see the rules, as Juan Pablo just described it, as powerful to you in your role at your company?
Well, that's one of the things we've been discussing about the language. There are plans on the language. Basically, the mod security sec rule language, it's basically was thought for a different thing, for only doing virtual patching, and it has grown a lot, but it's not suited for a lot of the things that we are doing right now. So there is a combination of things that we should think about on doing, and probably having a language that can be thought in a higher level of abstraction that might be, I don't know, compile, transpile, or whatever to different settings. It will help a lot. For example, because I don't know that you can leverage to do also, or help you to do in Kubernetes deployments or whatever all the deployment you're trying to do. I think that will help a lot because you can use one tool to rule them all. So that's basically one of the idea we are trying to figure out from the core rule set group, in which what is this and how we can accomplish that.
Right. So we've been talking a little bit out in the future. Juan Pablo, what about the practical use for Coraza now? What are the use cases that people might be looking to in the near term, recognizing that there's an opportunity for much greater usage and value from Coraza later?
Sure. Well, so basically, Coraza by itself, it doesn't do much. It requires a rule set. So when you install Coraza plus core rule set, you earn basically, when you install Coraza with rule set, you have the opportunity to simply create a smart scoring model for your application, and after that you can simply start tweaking and removing false positives in order to create a much better and secure application. Today we are very connected to what you can do with mod security. We have just reached the milestone when we are taking our own path. So basically, we expect people to take a more API-centric approach and use our features to run all kinds of protection against endpoint, like rate limiting or many stuff that will make a rule engine really useful for a company in terms of modern applications.
Sanjay, how do you see the shorter term value of Coraza vis-a-vis what people are doing with ModSec and in OWASP? Is this something that people should be really toying with now? What's the way people can utilize it now?
Yeah, no, I think, see, just to take a step back, right? So for us, the interest in Coraza, other than the aspects that I talked about around the rule engine aspects of it, is it's in the open source world itself, right? And again, we have had a strong presence in the open source world. We basically built a distributed tracing platform as part of Traceable and open sourced it, and it's available for folks to use so that other applications internally can be built and can be utilized as part of the open core model that we have as part of Hypertrace is what we call it, which is a Traceable open source offering for distributed tracing. From Coraza perspective, that was also a very interesting thing for us, where we looked at it and we said there is a big aspect of the rule engine similar to ModSec that we said, okay, this is something that we can back it up. We also have another project which is in development right now, which is called Crappy, which is a vulnerable application for training and certification. That's an OWASP project, and we have open sourced that. So there's a strong association of Traceable always, right? Now, when it comes to the Coraza itself, the beauty, as Juan Pablo was saying and Felipe is saying, because it is open source, and that means that anybody who's using ModSec today, right, why continue to use something that is a little bit legacy now when there is a newer project written in Go, highly performant, that you can actually move to, right? So that's where I look to encourage anybody today who is using ModSec for any rules-based detection of anomalies to basically migrate over to Coraza because it's an open source project where folks can contribute into it, written in Go. So there is a lot of traction that actually the project is going to get. That means that everybody is going to benefit in that shared code base that way.
And is that true for both the practitioners and enterprises, that is the end user community, as well as the supply chain, the people that are creating security products, infrastructure products? It seems to me that they are probably very much interested and would benefit from an open source project of this sort.
Absolutely. Anybody who has, whether they have embedded ModSec because they are a security product in some form, or if somebody is looking to say, I have a smaller need for a rules-based WAF as a product that they have for maybe some of their legacy applications or whatnot, I would highly encourage them to go and migrate to Coraza as a project.
Mm-hmm. Juan Pablo, when people are able to take advantage of the attributes that Coraza has, does that spill over into other aspects of what they're doing in trying to control a very complex environment? I'm thinking about security teams that are dealing with many different tools, many, a lack of integration across them. Is this something that could have an integrating aspect when you have the benefits of the language that you described? Is this going to be something that can help remove the Tower of Babel, if you will, among security products?
Yeah, so Coraza is built on a plugin architecture. Basically, all components are plugins themselves. So if you would like to orchestrate like everything on your environment connected to Coraza, there is a way you can connect APIs, talk to CI systems. You could also use Coraza to run your CI/CD and run your integration tests and load tests, everything in your own environments. Coraza itself is not a WAF, so basically we're talking at a code level. But also companies that integrate Coraza into their platforms to create a WAF, they are able to leverage on the current code to extend and connect and, as I said before, and orchestrate everything with Coraza services. They can replace rules, modify variables, update behaviors, block users, change the scoring rate for a user. Basically, you can make everything talk with the internal APIs and expose them as you need them.
That sounds very cool. Sanjay, we heard earlier from a partner at Traceable, Jyoti Bansal, about the need for cultural change so that the people in development and the people in security and operations can talk the same language and see the same data. Do you think Coraza is a possible accelerant to that cross-cultural benefit in the way that Pablo has described?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Jyoti is referring to broadly as part of a DevSecOps as a movement that way, which needs to bring together tools across various parts to make your applications secure, right? And I think that goes to anything that you do from agile development that you do, where you're releasing code on a regular basis. It's no longer enough for you to kind of just understand that finally it is secure. But if the developers get involved early on itself, either by using Coraza as one of the things, but also trying to understand how their microservices are built, what type of microservices are getting deployed, what APIs are getting exposed across the board, what type of data is flowing through those APIs. Understanding all of these different aspects of APIs from a developer's perspective and broadly into the DevSecOps as a function is very, very critical. And Coraza can play a huge role where if there are certain known attack vectors that actually can be codified and can be put in as rules, then those rules can be put in a standard format that they have control over, and they can extend that code as well as developers themselves, right? That's where I definitely see this as part of that overall engine to get DevSecOps to work in a seamless fashion going forward.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Felipe, you're a security engineer, not just a contributor to Caraza. In your engineer role, do you see the Caraza as an accelerant to the DevSecOps benefit that both Sanjay and Juan Pablo have referred to?
Well, not right now, but I see it in the future. We are still trying to get. I mean, one of the things that we are really fighting in with Caraza and trying to get that millisecond additional on everything. So we are trying to excel the performance on production systems because we can, because the tooling helps you, because everything helps, and that's another thing that it's very easy to see from the DevSecOps perspective. It's like you have a tool that can be really tested to the core. You have a tool that can be really benchmarked to the core. So this is really a really strong characteristic from Caraza, that you can get it into a pipeline and write your tests and get a real knowledge on the product, from the memory consumption to how it's going to be really working for your use cases. So I think this is one of the good things that we have with Caraza.
Yeah, it's not every day that you see a technology that has those short-term positive benefits that you just described, Felipe, but then has a long tail of value, as we've been describing, around the rules, languages, and integration and DevSecOps. So a really interesting development. That's why we wanted to have this presentation today, to bring this to people's attention. So Juan Pablo, what's the next step in getting adoption? Obviously, we have to get the word out. But to Felipe's point about what is very interesting about the practical, tactical benefits of Caraza, what should people know so that perhaps spurs greater adoption that then allows for those greater benefits a little bit down the road?
So actually, Felipe is part of the team because he has a lot of experience in open source. So what we try to do with Caraza is create a community-friendly project, something that you will come and you will know exactly what you have to do with the code. We mean, if you create a PR, you can push code into Caraza, and there are so many controls, so many validations, so many tests that it's really hard to make a mistake. So basically, we want to encourage people and companies to participate and contribute. We also discuss all of our features in our monthly meetings, and we have a spirit of community that we want to take not only to the persons as developers, but also we want to discuss with companies that are integrating technologies. Each time we notice that a company creates an issue on Caraza, we will try to reach them, find their feedback. We earn a lot of intelligence from them, like on performance. Sometimes they won't create a bug, so it's important to kind of pull information for them and asking them directly if they have issues. So basically, spreading the word that we are a community project. We have we are a group of 5 people right now. We have many side projects. We want to integrate Apache. We want to integrate Nginx. We want to integrate. There are many integrators. There's Traceable. There is also HA Proxy. So we have to take a focus on what people is doing with Caraza, because we are a library, a / framework.
This would be a good time perhaps to advance our slides, because we have some resources people can refer to learn more. I think the next slide has some details. Okay, Sanjay, who do you think should get involved with this project that may not have considered getting involved with a WAF or a rules engine project? Why should this be important to more developers and contributors?
So I think the folks that I see very actively getting benefit from this is security engineers, product security, depending on the organization and everything else, and definitely developers in the long run, as they can fundamentally, based on this, understand what is critical when it comes to protecting your applications, right? And the rules engine and all that is just part of it. But as a developer, it's beneficial to understand the types of attack vectors that can come in, and how do you actually eventually, how can anybody trying to take advantage of the code that you're writing can actually take advantage of it. That's where I see the benefit for developers in getting trained in a lot of security aspects of it. But the security engineers can come and contribute, of course, in many ways, not just in the code, but also in terms of the rules, and the language itself can get enhanced based on that, right? I think, Felipe, I'm sure you have a much richer experience on this one to share. What are the right people that can get involved as part of this?
Yeah, well, you mentioned a couple. I think that integrations is, as Juan Pablo said, is one of the things that we should thrive on. We should have as many integrations as possible that will show the strengths of the Corazza core. And I think that's one of the things that is really, really we need to focus on that. We are getting a very strong core for other people to create from. So security engineers can pinpoint places where you can do, for example, clearly Corazza can work as a policy enforcement point for anything. And as Juan Pablo said, adding plugins for whatever you want to do is one of the things that we want. We want ideas on how Corazza can benefit your own flow or your own access control. I mean, maybe you want to use machine learning, maybe you want to use the phases of the moon, or whatever you want to add to Corazza. We are very welcoming.
Well, great. We're coming up towards the end of our time, so we can go to some questions now. I have one here. It's a little bit of a general question, but it relates to why modern open source tools and techniques like Corazza are important to API testing, security, and performance. So I think this is generally asking, how is open source becoming more powerful when it comes to API testing and security in general? I'll open this up to anybody.
Yeah, so APIs, there are recipes to build APIs, but when we go to production, we notice it doesn't work. So basically, every company use their own methodologies, and they have their own structures. So there's so much flexibility in the aspects of design that you also need a strong flexibility on the aspects of testing. You must be capable to adapt your solutions to what the build, because in reality that's not what happens. When you create an API, the solutions has to work for your APIs, not your solutions for the APIs. So I think technologies like Corazza will help the market, as they will provide enough tools to integrate with things that are complex, are not really common out there on the market, like strange APIs. That's a word, a strange API.
Yeah, I was going to mention that Corazza is very easy to integrate, as we said. So I foresee a bunch of tools for executing Corazza as part of an API testing in any pipeline you want. I mean, we can create any CLI command that does run your test, but also includes a smaller portion of Corazza that will not actually be calling any service, but you're actually testing your rules. So this is really has the possibilities, is endless, and it's easy to code, easy to use, very pipeline friendly. I mean, I foresee a lot of benefits here.
Yeah, exactly. And when you measure efforts using Corazza in your CI environment, you are capable of telling things like your API endpoint is being slow because this regular expression is generating so much load on the application. So it is super interesting for companies to know at which point their WAF rules are making it slower.
Here's another question that's sort of an obvious one that we really haven't addressed is how does Corazza help companies make themselves safer or deal with security better? So what are some of the takeaways, the benefits of Corazza to get after and improve your security posture? Anyone? How does Corazza make us a safer organization based on attack?
Sorry, Dana, I kind of missed you a bit on the question.
Yeah, I think they're just asking how does the benefits of Corazza translate into a more secure posture for an enterprise, for example?
Yeah, yeah, Sanjay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Felipe. Basically, the conversation is about what it was already talked about, is Corazza is a rule engine at the end of the day. That means that it is as powerful as the rules that you have. A very powerful rule engine, but at the same time, there are rules that are needed, right? That means that you need to know, if you know your application well, that is one, but also if you are looking to, as I said before, if you can codify a set of attacks and you're able to actually build rules for it, Corazza can protect against those because it can validate those rules and make sure that any traffic that's coming in can be validated, right? And that's the crux of what Juan Pablo has been talking, Felipe have been talking about as well, right? But I'll answer a little bit of what Dana, you were asking before as well from an APIs perspective. APIs, as in API security and API security testing, is a lot more complex than what you would typically do from a WAF where you're looking at a single payload point and making a decision, which is what Corazza and ModSec as an evolution into Corazza is really good at. It means that you can actually take a look at a single data point and say, is this good or bad, right? But when you look at, that means that you, from an API's perspective, there is a very clear migration for what a ModSec used to do to what Corazza can do, because it can understand the data even better, and it is highly performant, which you can go and modify and customize those rules to fit your needs as well, right? And I think that is where this starts as a basis for some of those things. But API security and API security testing is much broader, and of course there will be some parts of that we will be contributing, and over a period of time, Corazza will become richer and richer to deal with that as well.
Okay, that's it for the questions I have right now. I imagine we'll get some more in. Is there anything else, Juan Pablo or Felipe, that we haven't touched on that you think is important for our audience to understand about Corazza in order to explore it and then perhaps use it and contribute to it?
Sure. So I think it's super interesting to understand how does a rule engine work. So basically, there are two main components: what's a transaction and what's a rule. A rule can basically translate all variables from a transaction into a human readable language, and it can apply operators like, for example, a regular expression. So you can filter a request based off any variable from the transaction, like the URL. You can apply a transformation that will allow you to avoid false positives. I mean, bypasses or any kind of encoded attack, and actions like, for example, disrupting a request. Basically, all of these capabilities of Corazza are extensible, and you can use them to create anything you want, insert a captcha on anything. So basically, I invite everyone to contribute on the project, that as it's super simple to integrate any of this.
Anyone else? Is there something we should add before we close out?
Well, I think we covered a lot of things from my perspective. Look forward to more and more open source contributions. from the community into Coraza, and that's what excites us.
All right, well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. A big thank you to our organizers today, API Days and Night Media, as well as the APIsecure conference sponsors. I'd like to also thank our audience for joining this live discussion on how open source project Coraza forms an exciting new expansion and extension of the traditional web application firewall approach. Please look for more information on Coraza and how to get involved at coraza.io, as well as on GitHub and OWASP. Lastly, a big thank you to our panelists. We've been here today discussing this with Juan Pablo Tosso. He's Security Research Engineer at Traceable AI. Thank you so much, Juan.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you.
We've also been here with Sanjay Nagaraj. He's a co-founder and CTO at Traceable AI. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And we've also been joined by Felipe Zipitria. He's a senior security engineer at Life 360 and a contributor, of course, to Coraza. Thank you so much. Well, that's all there is today for this roundtable. I'm Dana Gardner, Director of Content, at Traceable AI. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and the whole show here at APIsecure Conference.